A nurse working her third double shift in 4 days wiped blood from a stranger's face at 2 in the morning. He grabbed her wrist and asked a question no patient had ever asked her before. When was the last time you slept? She should have walked away. He was flanked by armed bodyguards. His suit cost more than she earned in 6 months, and his eyes held the kind of darkness that swallows people whole. But she did not walk away. Instead, 3 days later, she made the most reckless phone call of her life. She called him. And the man who terrified an entire city answered with 5 words that changed everything. I was wondering when you would call. What happened next destroyed her ex, shattered her old life, and pulled her into a world of power, danger, and a love so consuming it nearly cost her everything. But here is the part that will keep you listening. The man who promised to protect her? He was the most dangerous person she had ever met. And the ex who abandoned her? He was about to find out exactly what happens when you humiliate someone that Damien Cross has claimed as his own. If that grabbed your attention, make sure to subscribe so you do not miss what happens next. I am releasing another incredible story tomorrow. While you are here, leave a comment and let me know where in the world you are watching from. I truly love seeing how this community spans the entire globe. This is a story about what happens when a woman who spent her whole life being invisible finally lets herself be seen by the most dangerous man in the room. It will remind you that sometimes the life you are afraid to live is the only one worth choosing. All right, let us dive in. The fluorescent lights in the hospital cafeteria hummed like trapped, angry hornets. They cast a sickly yellow film over everything, turning my coffee into something that looked like swamp water. Still, I wrapped my hands around the flimsy paper cup, desperate for any warmth to seep into my frozen fingers. 3 double shifts in just 4 days had hollowed me out, leaving an empty shell that just went through the motions. This is what it means to be powerless. This is what happens when you have nothing left to protect you. And you need to understand what that feels like. The cheap vinyl seat let out a long squeak as I tried to get comfortable. My blue scrubs were faded and thin, worn through at the knees, clinging to a body that was beyond tired. All around me, the cafeteria pulsed with the strange, quiet energy of a hospital at 2 in the morning. Residents spoke in hushed tones. Trays clattered. A pager shrieked its demanding beep, and my shoulders instantly tensed. I should have been at home, asleep in my cramped studio apartment with its faucet that never stopped dripping. I could not afford the plumber, and my neighbor practiced his bass guitar at all hours of the night. But being home meant being alone with my thoughts, and my thoughts always circled back to things I had spent the last 6 months desperately trying to bury. I would remember Marcus. I would remember the chilling sound of his laughter when I told him I was pregnant. That laugh was sharper than any of the cruel words that came after it. Emma Chen. A voice cut through the dark memories. I looked up. Dr. Morrison, one of the emergency room attendings, stood there holding a clipboard. We need your help in Trauma Bay 2. There is a motor vehicle accident on its way, about 5 minutes out. I gave a single nod and was already on my feet, my body working on pure instinct. The barely touched coffee went straight into the trash can. Another wasted $3 I did not have to spare. But that was my life now. It was just a long line of small wastes, small defeats, and small moments of emptiness that all added up to a life I no longer recognized. When I pushed through the double doors, the emergency room was a storm of organized chaos. Nurses moved with a fluid, practiced efficiency. They prepped beds and checked vital equipment. The doors to the ambulance bay were wide open to the cold November air, which rushed in smelling of wet asphalt and coming rain. I snapped on a fresh pair of gloves and began checking the trauma cart. My hands knew every single motion so well I could have done it with my eyes closed. Maybe I was doing it with my eyes closed, in a way. Just sleepwalking through my own existence, completely invisible to everyone, especially to myself. The sirens screamed louder, getting closer. Flashing red and blue lights splashed across the walls, painting them in violent colors. "Single car collision," the paramedic shouted as they wheeled the gurney inside. "Male, late 20s, a GCS of 15, and his vitals are stable. He was refusing transport at first." "I am fine." The voice that cut through the noise was like dark velvet stretched over solid steel. It was the kind of voice that made everyone stop and pay attention, even if they did not know why. "This is all completely unnecessary." I finally looked up from the supply cart, and for a second, the entire world seemed to tilt. He was sitting on the gurney, as if it were a king's throne, his back perfectly straight despite the blood that traced a path down his face from a cut near his temple. He wore a suit, and even I could tell it was the kind of suit that cost more than I earned in 6 months of work. The fabric was torn at the shoulder, revealing a white shirt stained deep crimson with his own blood. But it was his face that made me freeze. He had sharp cheekbones and a jaw that looked like it was carved from marble. His dark eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail with an assessment that felt chillingly military. He could not have been much older than 30, but his eyes held something ancient, something that had witnessed far too much and had forgotten absolutely nothing. Standing just behind him, positioned by the door like silent guards, were two other men. They wore dark suits that bulged just slightly at the hip. They were not members of hospital security. They were certainly not police officers. They were something else entirely, something far more dangerous. "Sir, we need you to allow us to examine you," Dr. Morrison said, and his voice was strained. I knew that tone of voice very well. It was the one he always used when he was deeply nervous, but trying desperately not to let it show. The man's intense gaze shifted to the doctor, and I watched Dr. Morrison physically take a step backward. "I have had worse cuts from shaving. Just clean it up so I can be on my way. Hospital policy requires a full examination. I do not care about your policies." Each word he spoke was sharp and perfectly controlled, but an undercurrent of pure danger flowed just beneath the surface. "Clean the wound. Now." Dr. Morrison's panicked eyes met mine from across the room. "Nurse Chen, could you please handle this? I have to go check on the patient in Bay 3. What a coward, I thought. But I could not bring myself to blame him. Every single one of my instincts was screaming for me to say no, to make up any excuse to get away. This man radiated danger just like the sun radiates heat. It poured off him in invisible, suffocating waves. But I was so tired. I was tired down to my very bones, so tired that fear felt like just one more emotion I did not have the energy left to feel. "Of course," I heard my own voice say. I gathered the supplies I needed, antiseptic, gauze, and butterfly closures, and I walked toward the gurney. When I got closer, his presence was even more overwhelming. He smelled of expensive cologne, rich leather, and something else entirely. It was a metallic scent that might have been blood, or it might have been gunpowder. The smell made my head feel light. "This might sting a little," I said, my voice sounding much calmer than I actually felt. I had treated gang members with stab wounds, people who had overdosed, and patients who had tried to harm themselves or others. I told myself I could handle one man with a simple head wound, no matter how unsettling he was. I reached up with a sterile wipe to clean the blood from his temple, and his hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was not hard enough to cause pain, but it was firm enough to stop me completely. His skin was incredibly warm against mine, and I felt my own pulse leap beneath his strong fingers. "Your hands are shaking." It was a statement, not a question. "I am fine." I tried to pull my arm away, but his grip did not loosen at all. "I need to clean that wound before it becomes infected." His dark eyes locked with mine, and I felt completely pinned, like a butterfly under glass. In the harsh fluorescent light, his eyes were darker than I first thought. They were almost pure black. And I saw something in them that made me forget how to breathe. It was not simple cruelty. It was something more like the absolute, unbreakable certainty of a person who had never once been told no. He would not even know how to react to it. "When was the last time you slept?" he asked. The question was so completely unexpected that a short, bitter laugh escaped my lips. What are you now, my doctor? Just answer the question. I do not have to answer anything at all. You are the patient here, not my interrogator. I tugged harder on my wrist, and this time, he finally released me. My skin burned where he had touched it. Now please sit still and let me do my job. For a long second, I was sure he would refuse. But then, something in his expression changed. It was not quite a smile, but it was very close. You are not afraid of me. Should I be afraid of you? I began cleaning the wound, and my hands were perfectly steady now, despite everything. The cut was not very deep. It would not require stitches, just a few butterfly closures, and a stern lecture about monitoring for concussion symptoms, a lecture I knew he would completely ignore. He never answered my question. He just watched me work with a quiet intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. I could feel his guards watching me too. Their presence was a constant heavy pressure on my back. You are good at this, he said after a few moments of silence. It is my job. That is not what I meant. I did not ask him what he meant. I did not want to know what he meant, or why his deep voice was doing strange things to the pit of my stomach. I just focused on the wound, on the familiar motions of cleaning and closing. I focused on anything except the way he was looking at me, like I was some kind of complicated puzzle he was determined to solve. All done, I said, taking a step back and peeling off my gloves. You really should stay for observation, but I have a feeling you are not going to. You guessed correctly. He stood up from the gurney, and I finally realized how tall he was, at least 6 feet 2 inches tall, with a powerful build that suggested many hours in a gym and perhaps a life of violence. What is your name? It is on my badge. I want to hear you say it. There was a command in his tone that made refusal feel like an impossible, dangerous choice, even while the rational part of my brain was screaming at me to turn and walk away. Emma. Emma Chen. He repeated my name slowly, as if he were tasting every single syllable on his tongue. Emma Chen. Then he pulled out his phone. Actually, it was phones, plural. I saw he had at least 2 of them as he made a call without ever taking his eyes off me. Bring the car around to the front. We are leaving. Sir, you really should wait. Thank you for your assistance, Emma Chen. He started walking toward the door, and his 2 guards fell into a protective formation around him. Then he stopped and turned back to look at me. You work too much. You should go home now. Sleep. I do not need life advice from one of my patients. That almost smile appeared again. No, I do not suppose that you do. He reached inside his jacket, and I saw his guards tense up, as if even they were not completely sure what he was about to pull out. He withdrew a simple business card. He held it out for me to take. If you ever find yourself needing anything, I will not. But I took the card from him anyway, because saying no felt like a risk I could not quite calculate. The card itself was made of heavy, expensive paper. It had nothing on it but a name written in elegant script, Damien Cross, and a single phone number. You might be surprised, he said. And then he was gone, swept away into the dark night by his 2 shadows. I just stood there, holding the expensive card, my heart hammering against my ribs. My skin still felt warm where he had touched me. Around me, the emergency room had returned to its normal level of chaos. But the entire room felt different now, as if he had left a permanent mark on the very air itself. Emma. Another nurse, Sarah, suddenly appeared at my side. Are you okay? You look like you just saw a ghost. I am fine. I quickly shoved the card deep into my scrub pocket. I am just really tired. That guy was so intense. Did you see the size of his bodyguards? I am pretty sure they were carrying weapons. I did not notice. It was a lie. I had noticed everything. He saw every detail. The remainder of my long shift felt like a hazy dream. I handled the usual emergencies. A young boy with a fractured arm, an older woman experiencing sharp chest pains, and a college kid who had tumbled from a rooftop in a foolish attempt to impress his peers. These were the ordinary cases, the predictable ones that did not make my heart pound or my hands tremble. But when I finally punched out at 6 in the morning and stepped into the pale November light, my fingers instinctively found that card. I gazed at the name, Damien Cross, and questioned who this man was. Why his eyes had locked onto me, as if I were the most captivating puzzle he had encountered in a very long time. My phone vibrated. A message from Marcus. Lunch this week. We should talk. As if he had not made his stance perfectly clear 6 months before, telling me to just take care of it before walking out of my life for good. I erased his message without a reply and began the weary journey to the bus stop. Every part of me throbbed with exhaustion from my feet to my spine. The biting morning air was so cold, it felt like fire in my lungs, and far away, the sound of sirens cut through the air. I tried to toss the business card into the first public trash can I came across. My intention was clear, but my body refused to cooperate. My hand froze mid-air, poised above the garbage, my fingers unwilling to release the small piece of cardboard. With a frustrated sigh, I jammed it deep into my pocket and continued on my way. 3 days passed, and I found myself back in the emergency room for another grueling all-night shift. That was the night my entire world fell apart in a manner I could never have predicted. The evening began just like any other. I signed in, went over the patient files, and assisted in preparing the floor for the expected chaos of a Friday night. Dr. Morrison had the night off, and Dr. Patterson was covering, a welcome change since he did not treat me like I was a fragile thing. Around 7 in the evening, Sarah found me organizing medical supplies. "Hey," she said, "there is someone at the reception desk asking for you." A stone dropped in my stomach. "Who is it?" He would not give his name, just said it was personal and urgent. She wiggled her eyebrows suggestively. "He is incredibly handsome, like ridiculously good-looking. Is there some secret you are hiding from me?" But her words barely registered. I was already in motion, pushing past her as my heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A deep certainty settled in my gut that I knew, with a strange and unshakable conviction, exactly who was waiting for me. Except I was completely mistaken. There in the waiting area stood Marcus, looking just as he did 6 months ago on the day he left me. His hair was flawless, his suit was impeccable, and he wore that perfect smile that once promised me a storybook romance. Now, it only made my stomach churn with nausea. Standing next to him was a woman I did not recognize. She was tall, with radiant blonde hair, and on her left hand, a diamond ring glittered so brightly it was like a miniature sun. Emma. Marcus's voice was slick and cheerful, as if we were just old acquaintances meeting by chance. "I have been trying to get in touch with you. I have been busy." I folded my arms over my chest, suddenly hyper-aware of my creased scrubs, my disheveled bun, and the dark circles of exhaustion beneath my eyes. Next to his bride-to-be, because that is what the ring meant, I looked like an absolute wreck. "This is Amber," he announced, wrapping an arm around her. "Waist. Amber, this is Emma. We used to work together." Work together. That was the term he chose for it. Not that we had dated for 2 years, not that I had gotten pregnant, simply that we had worked together. "It is nice to meet you," Amber said, her smile polished and hollow. "You too." I shifted my focus back to Marcus. "What is it that you want?" "Just like I said in my message, we need to talk. I am hosting a small celebratory dinner tomorrow evening. It is an engagement party, actually. At the Sterling. I think you should come." The Sterling, naturally. It was the most exclusive dining establishment in the entire city, a place where you needed reservations half a year in advance and a credit card without a limit. "I have to work. You should take the night off. It will be a good time. You can get to know all of our friends. Celebrate our happiness with us." His smile grew wider, turning cruel. Unless, of course, you are afraid to show up by yourself. I know you do not really have anyone in your life right now. And that was the attack. The blade twisted between my ribs, so sharp and quick I almost did not register the pain. But I did feel it. I felt the full force of the humiliation searing through my veins like acid. You came by yourself. I already knew those words would become a bitter ghost. I could hear them now. Tomorrow evening, when I failed to appear, he would say them to his friends, to the whole room. She came by herself. Poor lonely Emma, still all alone after all this time. She can't even find a date. I will consider it, was the only response I could force out. Excellent. He was already looking away from me, his attention elsewhere, dismissing me completely. 8 o'clock, do not be late. I stood frozen as they walked away, watching as Marcus leaned over to murmur something in Amber's ear that made her laugh. I watched them vanish into the city night as if they were never even there. My hands were trembling again. I squeezed them into tight fists, my fingernails pressing hard into my palms. Sarah had materialized at my side. Are you all right? I am fine. That was the ex, right? The one who did that thing. I said I am fine. But I was not fine. I was the complete opposite of fine. I felt the kind of desperation that pushes people to do foolish, impulsive, and possibly catastrophic things. Like retrieving a business card from their locker at 3 in the morning during a break they had neither earned nor should have been taking. Like fixating on a phone number for a solid 20 minutes without looking away. Like dialing that number before they could convince themselves it was a terrible idea. The line rang once, then twice, and then a voice answered. Yes. The voice was deep, controlled, and felt both recognizable and entirely alien at the same time. Mr. Cross. My own voice sounded weak, much smaller than I wanted it to. This is Emma Chen, from the hospital. We crossed paths a few days ago. There was a stretch of silence, long enough for me to worry that he had disconnected the call, or that he had no memory of me at all. Or maybe, Emma. He spoke my name like it was a solemn vow. I was beginning to wonder when you might call me. I need your help with something. The words rushed out of me before I had a chance to hold them back. I have this event tomorrow evening, a dinner party, and I require an escort, which is not the right word. A date, I stammered, my cheeks burning with heat, even though he was not there to see it. It would only be for a couple of hours. I realize this is a huge thing to ask, and that you surely have more important things to occupy your time. But I promise I would not be calling if I were not completely desperate. And at what time should I arrive to pick you up? I paused in the middle of my frantic explanation. What? What time? He repeated, each word spoken with deliberate calm. Should I pick you up? 7:30. I heard the words leave my mouth. But really, you do not have to do this. Your address. I recited it to him, my thoughts a chaotic whirl. This was madness. This was so far beyond madness I did not have a word for it. I knew nothing about this man. The only things I knew were that he was flanked by bodyguards, wore expensive clothing, and had eyes that perceived far too much. Emma. His voice became lower, creating a sense of intimacy that made my stomach flutter. Who was it that made you feel you had no choice but to make this call? It is not important. It is important to me. Why? The question escaped me before I could stop it. Why would you care? You have no idea who I am. Another silence, and then he said, No, but I intend to find out. I heard a noise in the background, someone speaking quickly in a language that might have been Italian. I must go. 7:30 tomorrow. Wear something that makes you feel powerful. He ended the call before I had a chance to. I stood motionless in the break room, the phone feeling heavy in my hand as a single question echoed in my mind. What have I done, and why did I do it? For the very first time in 6 long months, I felt like I might actually exist. Later that next evening, I found myself in front of my closet, staring at the sad little collection of clothes. It was as if I was hoping they would magically transform into an outfit suitable for a dinner at a place like the Sterling. They did not. My entire wardrobe consisted of 3 pairs of nursing scrubs and 2 pairs of faded jeans. I also had a simple black dress I had worn to my grandmother's funeral 5 years prior, and a sundress that still had a coffee stain I could never quite remove. This was everything I was. It was all hanging on cheap wire hangers inside a closet that carried the faint, damp smell of mildew. He had told me to wear something that makes me feel powerful. I did not own a single thing that made me feel powerful. I owned clothes that made me feel invisible, which had been the entire goal for so many months. Being invisible meant I was safe. Being invisible meant Marcus and his flawless life could never shatter me again. But now I had to be seen. Now I was supposed to walk into that restaurant on the arm of a man I barely knew and act like I belonged there. My phone vibrated against my hand. It was a text message from a number I did not recognize. I am sending a car. It will arrive at 6. Go with it. My fingers trembled just above the screen, ready to ask what this was, or why, or how in the world he got my number. Before I could type a single letter, a second message appeared. Trust me. Trust him. I had spoken to this man for maybe 15 total minutes, and he was already asking for my trust. The truly crazy thing was that some small, foolish part of me actually did. At precisely 6 o'clock in the evening, my apartment buzzer went off. I grabbed my jacket, the only coat I owned that did not have torn pockets, and made my way downstairs. I was expecting a simple taxi, or maybe a black town car at most. Instead, a massive black sport utility vehicle was idling by the curb, the kind with windows tinted so dark they were practically opaque. Polished stone walls. A driver was positioned next to the rear passenger door, a man so large he looked like a mountain dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. When he caught sight of me, he gave a small, respectful nod and pulled the door open. "Ms. Chen," he said, "Mr. Cross is awaiting your arrival." I lingered on the pavement for a moment. Every logical part of my brain was screaming at me that this is how people vanish without a trace. This is how young women become news headlines, their smiling photos flashing on television screens, while news anchors speak in solemn tones about tragedy and how no one ever saw it coming. But I stepped into the vehicle anyway. I did it because the only other option was to arrive at the Sterling by myself, wearing my funeral dress, and to see the triumphant smile on Marcus's face when he realized I had come alone after all. The inside of the car smelled of rich leather and something else, a subtle, expensive fragrance I could not identify. The seats were plush and heated. A chilled bottle of water was waiting for me in the cup holder. We moved through the city as dusk settled, and the streetlights began to flicker on, one by one, like newly born stars. I watched my own run-down neighborhood transform into more affluent ones, observed the modest buildings became taller and cleaner. I watched as the people on the sidewalks started wearing clothes that surely cost more than my entire month's rent. Finally, the vehicle slowed in front of a building I had passed 1,000 times but had never dared to enter. It stretched into this evening sky like a true monument to wealth, all shimmering glass and cold steel and quiet elegance. It was the kind of place where you just knew the doorman earned more money than I did. The driver came around and opened my door. "7th floor. They are expecting you." They? But he was already closing the door and getting back into the driver's seat. The sport utility vehicle was pulling away, abandoning me on the sidewalk in my flimsy jacket. I felt like I had accidentally wandered into someone else's life. The doorman held the main entrance open without me having to ask. The elevator was a cage of mirrors and soft lighting, designed to make everyone look impossibly better. I watched my own reflection repeat into infinity, and I wondered if every single one of them was as terrified as I was. The 7th floor had only a single door. It was the penthouse, of course. I lifted my hand to knock, but I hesitated for a moment. This was completely insane. The door swung open. A woman was standing there, looking elegant and perfectly composed, with her silver hair pulled into a flawless bun. She was dressed entirely in black, a simple but obviously expensive outfit. And when she smiled at me, a genuine warmth actually reached her eyes. "Emma, please come in. Come in. We do not have very much time." She guided me inside before I could even think of a reply. "I am Teresa. Mr. Cross asked me to help you get ready." The apartment, or rather, the penthouse, because calling this place an apartment was like calling the entire ocean a puddle, was all clean lines and enormous floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. The furniture was sparse, but it was clear each piece cost more than my car. In fact, it probably cost more than several of my cars, or even every car I had ever owned all put together. "Get ready?" I finally managed to ask. "For dinner, dear. Come with me. I have pulled some options for you." She led me down a long hallway and into a bedroom that was larger than my entire studio apartment. 3 dresses were laid out on the enormous bed, and each one was more beautiful than the one before it. "Mr. Cross was not certain of your size, so I brought a few. Let us see what fits best." My mind was spinning, struggling to understand any of this. "Mr. Cross arranged all of this. He can be very thoughtful when he chooses to be." Teresa was already lifting the first dress, a stunning deep burgundy that seemed to shimmer in the soft light. Though, just between us, I have never seen him go to this much trouble for anyone. "You must have made a very strong impression." I cleaned a small cut on his head. "That is all I did." Her smile was knowing, and it made my cheeks flush with heat. "Try this one on first." The dress fit as though it had been tailored specifically for me. The expensive fabric clung to my body in ways my scrubs never had, reminding me that I had a shape that was not defined by exhaustion and work. The rich color brought a warmth to my skin that I had forgotten was even there. Teresa worked with a quick and efficient grace, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. She expertly pinned my hair up into a style that looked completely effortless, but was almost certainly not. She applied makeup with a delicate touch that enhanced my features instead of hiding them. When she finally turned me around to face the mirror, I almost did not recognize the person staring back. I did not look powerful, not exactly, but I definitely did not look invisible anymore either. "Beautiful," Teresa said, her voice filled with clear satisfaction. "He will be very pleased with this." "Where is he?" The question escaped my lips before I could stop it. "He is finishing some business. He will meet you at the restaurant." She handed me a small clutch purse that perfectly matched the dress. "Your phone and identification are inside." And Emma, she caught my gaze in the mirror. "Do not let anyone make you feel like you are less than you are. Not tonight, not ever again." The sport utility vehicle was waiting for me when I went back downstairs. It was a different driver this time. He was just as large, just as silent. We drove through streets I knew, but I had never seen them like this. Never from the quiet interior of a vehicle that cost more than I would earn in 10 years. The Sterling appeared before us, a temple dedicated to excess. The building glowed with warm light, and perfectly dressed people glided in and out of the entrance. There was a valet service, a red carpet, an actual red carpet that led to grand doors held open by men in spotless uniforms. I knew then that I had made a terrible mistake. I did not belong in a place like this. I did not belong anywhere near it. The driver opened my door, opened my— "Miss Chen, Mr. Cross is waiting for you inside." My legs somehow managed to carry me out of the car, up the length of that red carpet, and through the doors that closed silently behind me. The inside was all dark wood and flickering candlelight, the kind of quiet, understated luxury that shouted money so old it no longer needed to prove anything. A host materialized at my elbow almost instantly. "Miss Chen, this way please." He led me through the main dining area, past tables filled with people who looked like they spent their summers in the Hamptons and their winters in Aspen. We walked past a bar where a single glass of wine likely cost more than my entire electricity bill. I felt every single eye on me, and I could feel the heavy weight of their judgment. And in that moment, I saw him. Damien was standing at the entrance of a private dining room, and every rational thought in my mind simply vanished. He was wearing a suit that made his clothes from the hospital look like a rehearsal. It was entirely black, tailored to perfection, and the instant his eyes locked with mine from across the room, something in his gaze intensified. He started moving toward me, his walk a kind of predatory ballet that made people instinctively get out of his way. His security detail, a new set of men but just as conspicuous, kept a perimeter around him, but he paid them no mind at all. "Emma," he said, and my name was a deep vibration I felt in my bones. His eyes swept over my entire body, slow and methodical, and I watched his jaw clench. "You look overdressed," I tried to joke, but the words came out as a whisper. "Perfect," he murmured, offering me his arm. "They are waiting for us." "They?" I asked, but he was already guiding us forward, leading us into the private room where I could hear the sounds of cheerful conversation. I could make out a group of people gathered around a long table, set for what appeared to be 20 guests. And sitting there, right at the head of it all, was Marcus. He looked up as we walked in, a smirk already spreading across his lips, his mouth starting to form whatever cruel joke he had planned about my showing up alone. But then his eyes landed on Damien, and the smile didn't just fade, it shattered. His complexion went from pale to flushed and back to a deathly white in a matter of seconds. "Marcus." Damien's voice was smooth, almost conversational, yet it carried an undercurrent that made the small hairs on my neck stand on end. "What a pleasant surprise. I had no idea this was your engagement party." "Mr. Cross," Marcus managed to choke out. He scrambled to his feet, almost sending his wineglass crashing to the floor. We were not expecting." "Emma invited me," Damien stated, his hand coming to rest on the small of my back, its warmth pressing through the delicate material of my dress. The gesture was undeniably possessive, a claim that should have alarmed me, but all it did was send a jolt of pure electricity through my entire body. "I certainly hope that is not a problem." The entire room had fallen completely silent. Every single person at that long table was staring at us. No, they were staring at Damien with expressions that ranged from utter shock to poorly hidden fear. Amber's face had lost all its color, her perfect smile now trembling. "Of course not," Marcus managed to say, but his voice was shaking. "You are always welcome here, both of you. Please, have a seat." Damien guided me toward two empty chairs that people were suddenly scrambling to make available for us, nearly tripping over themselves in their haste to move. As we sat down, he gave my hand a brief, firm squeeze under the table. "Relax," he murmured, his lips so close to my ear I could feel his breath. "You are doing perfectly." But I was not relaxed at all. My heart was pounding so hard against my ribs that I was certain everyone in the silent room could hear it. I was beginning to understand that whatever I had just walked into, it was something much, much bigger than I had ever imagined. Marcus could not bring himself to look at Damien. None of them could. Everyone at the table kept shooting him nervous looks, as if he might detonate at any given second, and their chatter became forced and hollow. "So, Emma," Amber began, her voice unnaturally high-pitched. "How do you and Mr. Cross know one another?" "I treated him at the hospital," I answered, reaching for my water glass, relieved to have an object to occupy my hands. "Just a few days ago." "How lovely," she said, her gaze shifting between the two of us, open confusion written all over her face. "And you two kept in touch." "He left a lasting impression." Damien's voice was like silk, but his hand found mine underneath the table, his fingers intertwining with my own. The motion was so effortless, so natural, as if it was something we had done countless times before. "Emma has a habit of staying on your mind." Marcus's knuckles were stark white as he gripped his wineglass. "I am sure she does." There was a venom in his words, a vile insinuation that made my stomach clench. Before I could even think of a reply, I felt Damien's grip on my hand tighten, just a fraction. Marcus, Damien began, his tone deceptively mild, like he was discussing the weather. I've been wanting to discuss those shipments that vanished last month, specifically the ones from the warehouse district. It was an obvious injustice, laid bare for everyone to see. Every drop of blood seemed to drain from Marcus's face, leaving it a waxy, pale color. He was suddenly the powerless underdog. I have no idea what you are talking about. The denial was weak, pathetic. Damien's smile was a weapon, all edges and ice. That is strange, he countered smoothly, because I possess receipts that tell a very different story. Receipts that bear your signature. This is what happens when the powerful decide to protect someone. You are about to see how it works. The air in the room grew instantly cold, and the silence from the other guests was absolute. They were like forest creatures that had scented a wolf. It has to be a mistake, Marcus stammered, his voice shrinking to a faint whisper. Oh, there was certainly a mistake, Damien agreed, leaning back with a chilling sort of calm. The mistake was your assumption that I would not notice, that I would not care. His gaze flickered to me for a fraction of a second before locking back onto Marcus. That you could treat another person as if they were disposable. In that instant, everything became clear. This was never about missing cargo or financial losses. This was about me. This was about the way Marcus had treated me, the things he had done. It was an impossible thought, but Damien had done this entire thing for me. The truth of it struck me with the force of a physical impact, stealing the air from my lungs. This incredibly dangerous, powerful man, a man I barely knew, had orchestrated this public execution simply because someone had wounded me. He did it because Marcus had made me feel insignificant, isolated, and completely worthless. Mr. Cross, Marcus pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation, I can explain everything. I am sure you can, Damien said as he rose to his feet, gently pulling me up with him. But my interest in hearing it has expired. Emma and I have more important places to be tonight. He guided me toward the exit, leading me past the stunned faces of the other guests and past a devastated Marcus, who looked as if he was about to be physically ill. At the doorway, Damien paused and glanced back. Congratulations on the engagement, he said, his voice carrying across the silent room. I truly hope you value what you have. Not everyone is granted a second chance. Then we were moving through the main dining room, 100 pairs of eyes tracking our every step. His hand remained a steady, warm pressure on my back, a silent anchor that kept me walking forward when my own legs felt like they might give way. The black SUV was waiting for us at the curb. This time, his guard stayed back as he opened the passenger door for me himself. I felt like I was on autopilot as I slid onto the leather seat. He got in beside me, and the heavy door thudded shut, encasing us in a bubble of profound silence. As the driver pulled smoothly into traffic, the vibrant city lights melted into a surreal blur. I do not understand, I finally managed to say, my own voice sounding foreign and thin. What was that back there? Who are you really? Damien turned to look at me. In the shifting shadows of the car, his eyes were like pools of dark water, reflecting nothing back. I am someone who dislikes seeing people get hurt. That is not a real answer, I insisted. No, it is not, he conceded. He reached up and loosened the knot of his tie, a surprisingly intimate gesture that made the small space feel even closer. The truth, Emma Chen, is that I am someone you ought to be very afraid of. Then why am I not afraid? The question escaped me in a breath of sound. His hand lifted, and his fingers traced a path along my cheek with a tenderness that was completely unexpected. That, he said softly, is what worries me the most. The vehicle came to a stop. I glanced out the window, my heart lurching when I saw we were not at my apartment building. We were parked in front of his, the gleaming tower with the penthouse that overlooked the entire city. I cannot, I began, the protest dying on my lips. I am not inviting you to come up, he said, his voice low. His thumb brushed along the line of my jaw, sending a shiver through me. I am asking you to permit me to ensure you arrive home safely. The building where you reside, Emma, has faulty locks. The security is practically non-existent. Anybody could simply walk inside. How do you know where I live? I asked, alarmed. I make it my business to know things, he replied simply. He let his hand fall away, but the phantom sensation of his touch lingered on my skin. Especially when they concern people who are important. I am not important to you. We only just met. Yes, he said, his intense gaze capturing mine. You are. And no, we did not. Before I could process his cryptic words, he was already out of the SUV, his hand extended to me. Moving against every rational instinct for self-preservation that I had, I placed my hand in his. His penthouse was different in the darkness. Far below, the city lights sprawled out like a galaxy of fallen stars, and the vast room felt alive with shadows and unspoken secrets. Damien's security detail had vanished the second we stepped out of the elevator, disappearing to whatever unseen posts men like them occupy. I found myself by the floor-to-ceiling windows, hugging my arms to my chest even though the room was warm. I heard him move behind me, followed by the soft sound of glass touching glass. Here, he said, appearing beside me with a tumbler filled with an amber liquid. You are trembling. I am fine, I lied, but I accepted the glass. The sharp burn of the expensive whiskey was a welcome distraction that helped to calm my frayed nerves. Why did you do that tonight? I asked. You were in need of assistance. I offered it. He stood next to me at the window, close enough for me to feel the heat radiating from his body, yet he made no move to touch me. That is all it was. That is not all, I countered, turning to face him fully. You utterly destroyed him. Marcus looked like he was on the verge of collapsing. I had to know. What did he take from you? A muscle tightened in Damien's jaw. Does it truly matter? Yes, I insisted, my voice gaining strength. It matters because I need to understand if I have just stepped into the middle of something incredibly dangerous. If Marcus is planning to, I trailed off, unable to voice the terrifying thought. Marcus is not going to do a thing, Damien said, his voice layered with absolute conviction. He understands precisely what happens to individuals who make the mistake of crossing me. What you witnessed tonight was an act of mercy, Emma. It was a warning shot, delivered in place of something far more permanent. Those words should have sent a chill of fear down my spine. Instead, a strange sense of rightness settled deep in my chest, like a truth my soul already recognized. This man was lethal. This man wielded a type of power that transcended mere wealth and influence, and somehow, against all logic, he was directing that immense power to keep me safe. I need to go home, I said, setting the tumbler down with a hand that shook. This was a mistake, this whole thing. Was it? He closed the small distance between us, and I instinctively stepped back until my shoulders hit the cool surface of the window. The cold glass was a sudden shock against my skin. Tell me you did not feel a sense of satisfaction watching him squirm. Tell me you did not feel a profound sense of relief when you walked into that restaurant on my arm instead of by yourself. That is not the issue, I argued weakly. That is precisely the issue, he corrected, his voice dropping lower. His hand came up to brace against the glass next to my head, effectively caging me in. You called me because you required someone's help. I came because I wanted to be that someone for you. Where is the mistake in that? You do not even know me, I whispered. I know that you work yourself into a state of utter exhaustion at a hospital that fails to value your dedication. I know you volunteer for the overnight shifts that nobody else wants because you are struggling to make ends meet. I know that someone hurt you so deeply that 6 months later, you still recoil when anyone gets too close to you. His eyes searched my face, as if memorizing every detail. I know that you are far stronger than you give yourself credit for, Emma Chen. My breathing hitched in my throat. How can you possibly know all of that? I told you before. I make it my business to know things, he murmured. He leaned closer, and I was enveloped in his scent. Expensive cologne, rich leather, and something else that was uniquely Damien. Especially when it concerns people who have captured my interest. Why do I interest you? The question was barely audible. He offered a slight smile that held no trace of humor. That is what I am currently trying to determine. The moment between us became a taut wire, humming with electricity and danger. And then, my phone rang from inside my clutch, shattering the fragile tension. I fumbled for the small purse Teresa had lent me, my hands shaking as I pulled out the device. Marcus's name was glowing on the screen. "Do not answer that," Damien commanded, his voice sharp and low, but my thumb had already swiped across the screen. "What?" "Emma, please, you need to listen to me." Marcus's voice was high-pitched with panic. "I do not know what you said to Cross, but you have to fix this. You need to call him and tell him it was all a big misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding, Marcus." "Emma, please," he begged. "He is going to destroy me. Everything I have built, everything I have ever worked for." "You mean everything you stole?" The words emerged from me, cold and sharp, surprising even myself. "Everything you built on lies." "I never—" He broke off, and I could hear his ragged breathing over the line. "Look, what happened with us? That was a personal matter. This is business. You cannot mix the two. You were the one who mixed them first. You did it when you came to my workplace with the sole intention of humiliating me. I was not trying to humiliate you. I was trying to be considerate, to include you by making sure you knew I would be arriving alone." "By reminding me that I have no one," I shot back, my voice rising in spite of myself. "You wanted me to feel exactly how I felt, Marcus. You wanted me to feel small, pathetic, and completely invisible. Do not you dare pretend otherwise." Suddenly, Damien's hand entered my field of vision. It was open, palm up, a silent command. I looked from his hand to his face, and I saw a certainty in his eyes that made my decision for me. I placed the phone in his palm. "Marcus," Damien's voice was like silk draped over sharpened steel. "Let me be exceptionally clear. You are going to leave Emma alone from this moment forward. You will not call her, you will not text her, and you will not so much as acknowledge her existence. If I learn that you have even glanced in her direction, what took place tonight will feel like a pleasant memory in comparison. Do you understand me?" I could not hear what Marcus said in reply, but I watched Damien's expression harden into something unforgiving. "Your engagement is now the least of your problems. I would suggest you start focusing on how you intend to explain the financial discrepancies in your accounts to your business partners. From what I hear, they are not nearly as forgiving as I am." He ended the call and handed the phone back to me. "He will not trouble you again." "You did not have to do that for me," I said quietly. "Yes," he countered. "I did." He then moved away, putting a few feet of distance between us that felt more like a mile. "You should stay here for the night." "What?" The suggestion stunned me. "It is late. You are clearly exhausted. The guest room has everything you could possibly need." He was already turning toward the hallway as he spoke. "Teresa left some clothes for you in the closet." "Damien!" I called out, stopping him. He paused with his back still to me. "I am not asking you to share my bed, Emma. I am asking you to allow me to take care of you. There is a very important difference." "Why?" The question tore out of me, raw and desperate. "Why do you care so much about what happens to me?" He turned around slowly, and the unguarded expression on his face made my heart stumble in my chest. "Because when I saw you in that hospital, working yourself to the point of breaking, so exhausted you could hardly remain on your feet. And still, you showed me kindness. You had no idea who I was. You did not care. You simply saw a person who was hurt and you offered your help. He took another step closer to me. Do you have any idea how exceptionally rare that is in the world I live in? I was just doing my job. You were being human, in a way that most people have forgotten how to be, he corrected me. Another step, in a way that I had forgotten even existed. The very air between us crackled with a dangerous energy. I knew I should have turned and left. I should have demanded he take me home. But instead, I heard my own voice ask, "Where's the guest room?" A flicker of relief washed over his expression, so fast that I might have imagined it. "Follow me," he said. The guest room was just as beautiful, in the same elegantly simple way as the rest of his penthouse. The bed seemed impossibly inviting, and beyond the massive windows, the city lights sparkled like a field of scattered diamonds. "There is a bathroom through that door," Damien said, gesturing toward it. "You will find clothes in the closet. As I said, if you require anything—" "I am just down the hall." He turned as if to go, but I reached out and caught his arm. "Thank you for tonight, for everything you did." His other hand came up to cover mine where it rested on his suit sleeve. "Get some rest, Emma. We can talk in the morning." Long after he had gone, I remained standing in the middle of the room, my mind struggling to make sense of all that had just transpired. The beautiful dress, the disastrous dinner, the look on Marcus's face, the meaning behind Damien's words. It all spun around in my head like a dizzying, feverish dream. I found a pair of silk pajamas in the closet and changed into them. Naturally, they were a perfect fit. I slipped between sheets that felt as soft as summer clouds. I should have been far too agitated to sleep, completely overwhelmed by the chaos of the day. Instead, I was asleep almost the moment my head touched the pillow. And for the very first time in months, I did not dream of Marcus, or the child I had lost, or the future that had dissolved through my fingers like sand. I woke up to bright sunlight pouring through strange windows and the rich aroma of coffee. For one confused second, I had no idea where I was. And then, everything came rushing back in a flood of memories. I found Damien in the kitchen. He was dressed down in dark jeans and a simple gray sweater that, contrary to reason, made him look even more formidable, not less. He was intently reading something on his phone, a cup of coffee held in his other hand. "Morning," I said, feeling suddenly awkward in the pajamas he had provided. He glanced up, and the intensity in his eyes seemed to soften. "Good morning. Coffee, please." He poured me a cup from a sleek machine that probably cost more than my entire car and handed it to me in a heavy ceramic mug that felt designed for my hands. I took a small sip and almost moaned aloud. It was, without a doubt, the best coffee I had ever had in my life. "I really should be going," I said, even as a significant part of me wanted to stay in this gorgeous, peaceful place indefinitely. "I have a shift I need to get to tonight." "I will have one of my men drive you," he replied, setting his phone down to give me his undivided attention. "But before that, we have to talk." A knot of dread formed in my stomach. "About what?" "About what is going to happen next," he stated, leaning back against the marble counter, his arms folded across his chest. "Marcus is not going to accept this defeat quietly. He is going to search for ways to retaliate against both of us. I do not have anything he could possibly want. You possess the ability to speak about what you know, about his business, his connections." Damien's jaw hardened. "And you have my complete attention, which makes you a valuable asset in ways you cannot yet comprehend." "I do not know the first thing about his business dealings." "But he is not aware of that," he countered. He moved closer to me. "Which means you are going to need protection." "I cannot possibly afford protection." "I am not asking you to pay for anything," he said. His hand rose, gently tucking a stray piece of hair behind my ear. "I am offering it to you, without condition." "Why?" I took a step back, needing the space to clear my head. "Why would you possibly do something like that for me?" "Because," he paused, and a complex emotion crossed his face. Because the people who are important to me do not get hurt. That is the way my world operates. I do not want to be important to you, I insisted. The lie felt like ash in my mouth. And I do not want to be involved in whatever kind of world you occupy. It is too late for that. His voice was soft, but carried an undeniable finality. You became a part of it the very instant you decided to call me, the moment you allowed me to walk into that restaurant by your side. He eliminated the remaining distance between us, the moment I determined you were mine to keep safe. I am not yours. No, he conceded. Not yet. The two words hung in the air, thick with a combination of promise and menace. My phone started buzzing from the bedroom, likely the hospital calling to find out where I was. The real world was summoning me back. I have to leave, I whispered. I know, he said. But he made no move to step aside. He did not let me pass. Emma, there is something I need you to understand. My world is a dangerous place. The people in it do not follow conventional rules. If you choose to stay near me, that danger will reach you too. Then I will simply stay away from you. Will you really? His eyes delved into mine. Because I seriously doubt either of us finds that believable any longer. And he was right. Heaven help me, he was absolutely right. Something profound had shifted between us. It was something I could not define, but also could not possibly deny. When he looked at me, I no longer felt like I was invisible. I felt seen, truly seen, in a way that was both frightening and incredibly thrilling. Let me protect you, he murmured softly. At the very least, until this entire situation with Marcus is resolved. After that, if you still want to walk away from me, I will not try to stop you. Promise? His smile was tinged with sadness. I promise that I will try. It was not the assurance I had hoped for, but it was the honest truth. And for some reason, that honesty was more important. Okay, I heard myself agree. Okay. The following 2 weeks went by in a haze of ordinary life, yet they were punctuated by small events that served as constant reminders that my existence had been fundamentally altered. Damien largely maintained his distance, but his influence was everywhere. The faulty locks on my apartment building were mysteriously repaired overnight. A state-of-the-art security system materialized in my studio, installed by a team of discreet and efficient men. My landlord suddenly called to say he had been meaning to fix my leaky faucet for months. And no matter where I went, I could feel eyes on me. They were not menacing, but watchful and protective. His men were always there, observing from the periphery, ensuring my safety. This constant surveillance should have felt oppressive and suffocating. Instead, it felt like I could finally take a full breath for the first time in ages. Marcus, it seemed, had kept his word. Or, more accurately, Damien's unspoken threat had enforced his silence. There were no phone calls, no text messages, and no unexpected appearances at the hospital. I found out through Sarah that the disastrous engagement party had become the primary topic of gossip among the city's elite, especially the part where Damien Cross had arrived with me on his arm, causing Marcus to nearly faint from shock. Who is he really? Sarah had asked me over a terrible cup of cafeteria coffee. And more importantly, how can I find one for myself? I had just laughed it off, offering vague explanations about him being a new friend, claiming it was nothing serious. But at night, all alone in my newly secured apartment, I would think about his dark, intense eyes and his surprisingly gentle hands, and a deep voice that made promises I was not entirely sure I wanted him to keep. He would send me text messages from time to time about simple things. Did you eat today? Today? Or how was your shift? They were messages that should have been casual, but each one felt heavy with an unspoken meaning. I always gave him an answer. I told myself it was just common courtesy, simple gratitude for the help he had given me. I wasn't quite ready to admit to myself that it was becoming something more than that. 2 weeks and 3 days after that completely disastrous dinner, I was working a rare day shift when my phone began to ring. It was an unknown number, but some instinct urged me to answer it. Emma Chen? A woman's voice asked, her tone professional and cool. Yes, I replied. This is Jennifer Walsh from the St. Catherine's Billing Department. I am calling you about your outstanding balance. A cold dread dropped into my stomach. I had been actively avoiding any thoughts about the hospital bills from the miscarriage, those terrible reminders that had piled up far faster than I could ever hope to pay them. I am on a payment plan. Yes, I can see that noted here. I am actually calling to inform you that your balance has been paid in full. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. What? Your account shows a payment of $47,322, which was received yesterday. I just wanted to confirm I did not authorize this payment. My voice came out choked and strangled. Who paid it? The payment originated from Cross Industries. If there has been some kind of an error, I hung up the phone before she could finish her sentence. My hands were shaking so violently that I nearly dropped the device on the floor. He had paid off my medical bills. He did it without asking me, without even telling me. With a single transaction, he had erased a debt that would have taken me years and years to clear. A part of me knew I should have been grateful. Instead, a hot wave of fury washed over me. My official break was not for another 2 hours, but I immediately found Dr. Patterson and told him I needed to leave early. I said it was a family emergency. He took a single look at my face and simply nodded, asking no questions. By now, I had Damien's address programmed into my phone, though I had never truly admitted to myself why I kept it there. The cab ride to his building felt absolutely endless, my anger simmering and building with every passing city block. By the time I finally arrived at his skyscraper, I was practically vibrating with rage. The doorman recognized me this time and waved me right through without a single question. The elevator ride up to the 7th floor felt like I was descending into a battle. I pounded on his front door, hitting it hard enough to make my own knuckles ache. The door opened almost immediately. Damien stood there, wearing dress pants and a shirt that was only partially buttoned, making it clear he was in the middle of getting ready for something important. His eyes widened just a little when he saw me standing there. Emma, you had absolutely no right. I stormed past him, pushing my way into the enormous penthouse. You had no right to do that without asking for my permission first. He closed the door behind us carefully, his expression completely unreadable. I assume you are talking about the hospital bills. Of course I'm talking about the hospital bills. That was almost $50,000, Damien. $50,000 that you just threw at my problems as if it was completely nothing to me. It is nothing. He started moving toward me slowly, the way someone might approach a wounded, unpredictable animal. Emma, you were drowning in all of that debt. I was in a position to help, so I did. I never asked you to help me. You should not have to ask for help. His voice began to rise, finally matching the intensity of mine. You spend all your time taking care of everyone else. Every single patient who walks through those emergency room doors. Every person who comes to you in need. Who is there to take care of you? I take care of myself. I have always taken care of myself. And just look at where that has gotten you. He gestured toward me, his iron self-control finally starting to crack. You work yourself to the point of exhaustion for a hospital that pays you just barely enough to survive in this city. You live in an apartment that is not even safe. You are lucky if you eat one proper meal a day. That is not taking care of yourself, Emma. That is just barely surviving. Maybe just surviving is all I can possibly afford right now. But it is not all that you deserve. He closed the remaining distance between us, his hands coming up to gently frame my face. Do you not understand yet? You deserve so much more than the life you have settled for. Tears began to burn my eyes, and I hated them for appearing. I hated the weakness they always represented. You cannot just fix everything with your money. That is not how life actually works. I know that. His thumbs softly brushed away the tears that had started to fall despite all my efforts to stop them. But money is the thing that I have, Emma. And if I am able to use it to make your life even slightly easier, then why would I not? Because I do not want to owe you a single thing. Something painful flashed in his eyes. It might have been hurt, or maybe it was disappointment. Is that really what you think this is? Some kind of a transaction, is it not? You help me with this. And in return, I do what? What is it that you want from me, Damien? I want you to stop working yourself into an early grave. I want you to eat regular meals and sleep in a place where you feel safe and not look like you are about to completely shatter every single time that someone touches you. His hands slid down to my shoulders, his grip feeling firm, but still gentle. I want you to let me care about you without questioning my motives every time I do something nice for you. Why? The question tore its way out of me. Why do you care so much? You barely even know me. I know enough. His voice dropped, becoming intense and urgent. I know that you are so much stronger than you think you are. I know that you feel things more deeply than anyone I have ever met, even when you pretend that you do not. I know that when you smile, when you truly smile, not that fake, tired thing you do for everyone at work, it feels like the sun is finally coming out from behind the clouds. He pulled me even closer to him. And I know that I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the very moment you touched me in that hospital, and it absolutely terrifies me. That incredible confession just hung in the air between us, charged like the air right before a lightning strike. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break them, and I could not tell if it was from fear or from something else entirely. "This is completely crazy," I whispered. "We are crazy." "Probably." His forehead came to rest against mine. "Does that really change anything?" It should have changed everything. Nothing about this situation made any logical sense. Not his sudden interest in me, not the overwhelming way he made me feel, and definitely not the dangerous world he lived in that I was somehow becoming a part of. But logic had nothing at all to do with the way my body was responding to his nearness, or the way my hands had somehow found their way onto his chest, feeling the thunder of his heartbeat under my palms. "I do not know how to do this," I admitted in a small voice. "I do not know how to let someone get close to me again. Then we will simply figure it out together." He pulled back just enough so he could meet my eyes. "But first, there is something you need to understand. When I help you, when I fix things for you or pay for things or protect you, I am not expecting anything at all in return. I am not keeping some kind of a score. I am doing it because seeing you struggle when I could so easily ease that struggle physically hurts me. That is not a normal way to feel." "No, it is not." A small, faint smile played at the corners of his lips. "But I stopped being normal a very long time ago, Emma. The real question is whether or not you can accept that." Could I? Could I possibly accept a man who paid off my debts without even asking me? A man who had guards follow me just to make sure that I was safe? A man who looked at me like I was something both precious and terrifying at the exact same time? Could I accept all of the danger that always came with him? The whole world of shadows and violence that lurked just beneath his expensive suits and his gentle touches. "I am scared," I whispered, the words barely audible. "Good. That just means you are smart." His hands moved down to my waist, anchoring me to him. "I am scared too, if that makes you feel any better." "Of what?" I asked. "Of how much I already care about you. Of what I might have to do to keep you safe." His eyes darkened with a chilling intensity. "Of how far I would be willing to go if someone ever tried to hurt you." The words should have felt like a terrible warning. Instead, they felt like a sacred promise, one that settled deep into my bones, as if it were an undeniable truth. "I need some time," I said. "I need time to think about all of this, to figure out what it is I really want. Take all the time you need." But his hands tightened just a fraction on my waist. "Just promise me that you will stay safe while you are thinking. Your people are still watching me every single moment of the day." There was no apology in his voice, only a statement of fact. Does that bother you? It should have bothered me. No, I admitted softly. It makes me feel protected. Something fierce and deeply possessive flashed across his face. Good. We just stood there in his enormous penthouse, wrapped in each other's arms, the city spreading out below us like a vast canvas of endless possibilities. And for the very first time since Marcus had completely destroyed my life, I felt something other than constant pain or deep exhaustion or just a hollow numbness. I actually felt alive. My phone buzzed in my pocket, shattering the perfect moment. I pulled away from him reluctantly, checking the glowing screen. It was Sarah, asking if I was okay, reminding me that I had just run out of my shift without any explanation at all. I have to go, I said quietly. I need to deal with work and explain my sudden disappearing act. I will have someone drive you back. Damien, Emma. He caught my hand in his, lifting it to his lips in a gesture so incredibly old-fashioned that it should have seemed ridiculous, but instead, it just made my breath catch in my throat. Let me do this one small thing for you, please. I just nodded, not trusting my voice to work. He walked me to the front door, his hand a warm and steady pressure at the small of my back, a touch that felt like both ownership and comfort in equal measure. At the threshold, I turned back to face him. The hospital bills. Thank you for that. Even if I am still angry about how you did it, I am so grateful. That feeling was suffocating me. I know it was, he said, his smile both gentle and real. That is exactly why I did what I did. The black sport utility vehicle was idling downstairs, operated by the same driver who had taken me to that awful dinner that upended my entire world. He gave me a small nod in the rearview mirror, and I was surprised to see myself offering a faint smile in return. Just as we merged with the flow of traffic, my phone began to ring. It was another blocked number, but not the same one from the hospital's billing office. A man's voice, harsh and completely unknown, spoke my name. Hello, Emma Chen. You have to stop seeing Damien Cross. For your own safety, you need to walk away from him right now. A spike of ice shot through my veins. Who is this? I asked. Someone who is trying to save your life, he answered. Cross is a dangerous man. Far more dangerous than you can possibly imagine. The people who get close to him either end up dead or in a state far worse. If you have any sense, you will disappear before he decides you know too much about him. Then the call ended abruptly. I just sat there in the back seat, completely frozen, clutching the phone in my hand which was now trembling. The driver's eyes met mine in the mirror. Is everything all right, Miss Chen? Was it? Absolutely nothing about my life felt all right any longer. I had wandered into a situation that was immensely larger and more perilous than I had ever comprehended. I had no idea how deep this dark water ran, or if I had already waded in too far to ever get back to shore. But as we continued our drive through the city streets, moving past the hospital where I had logged so many hours feeling completely unseen, past my former apartment building with its faulty locks and perpetually dripping faucet, a critical realization hit me. I had no desire to go back. Whatever was coming next, whatever peril was hiding in the shadows of Damien's world, I was done with merely surviving. For the very first time in my existence, I wanted to truly live, even if living that way was the thing that would end me. I decided not to tell Damien about that threatening phone call, at least not immediately. Instead, I returned to work, managed a smile for Sarah's worried inquiries, and submerged myself in my shift with a level of concentration that only comes when you are desperate not to think. But that voice echoed in my mind. People around him end up dead, or worse. A full 3 days went by. They were 3 days of routine shifts, of carefully constructed smiles, and of pretending that my world was not spinning out of control. 3 days of Damien's text messages, which I found myself answering with more and more honesty. 3 days of feeling the presence of his security detail, a shadow that I had somehow learned to see as a comfort instead of a restriction. 3 days of attempting to persuade myself that I could leave this all behind if I chose to. On the fourth day, my fragile peace shattered completely. I was walking out of the hospital after a long night shift, so tired I felt I could fall asleep on the spot, when I spotted him. Marcus was propped against a car on the other side of the street, his gaze fixed on the employee exit with an intensity that made my stomach clench. I stopped dead on the steps, every fiber of my being screaming to turn around and run back inside. But it was too late. He had already noticed me. He was already pushing himself off the vehicle and crossing the road with determined steps. "Emma," he said, "we have to talk. Damien specifically told you to leave me alone." I reached for my phone, my fingers ready to dial. But who would I call? The police? Damien's security team, whom I sensed were somewhere close by. "This is urgent," Marcus insisted. "It is about Cross." He looked absolutely awful. There were deep, bruised-looking circles beneath his eyes. His normally immaculate appearance was a complete mess. "Please, just give me 5 minutes." Going against all of my better judgment, I gave a slight nod. 5 minutes, I said firmly. "We stay right here, where other people can see us." He shot a nervous look around, as if he expected someone to emerge from the darkness. Perhaps he did. "You have no idea what you have gotten yourself into," he began. "Cross is not the person you believe he is." "I know precisely who he is," I countered. "Do you really?" Marcus let out a laugh that was both bitter and sharp. "Do you know about the warehouse fire back in 2019 that resulted in 3 deaths? Are you aware of the shipments that pass through his docks that are not exactly above board? Or how about the way that people who betray him have a tendency to simply vanish?" My throat felt dry, but I managed to keep my voice even. "If he is as dangerous as you say, then why are you still walking around?" "Because I am useful to him. Because I possess information that he still requires." Marcus took a step nearer, and I could see the fear in his eyes. It was raw, authentic terror. "But you are a loose end, Emma. You are aware of me. You know about the engagement party. You have seen how he conducts his business. Once you stop being useful to him, he will dispose of you. That is quite enough." The voice came from directly behind me, deep and cold, and filled with an uncontained fury. I spun around to see Damien getting out of a black sport utility vehicle that I had not even registered pulling up. He moved with a lethal sense of purpose, his guards positioned on either side of him, and the expression on his face turned my blood to ice. Marcus's face drained of all color. "Cross." I was only trying to warn her. Damien's hand settled on the small of my back, that distinctly possessive gesture I had started to recognize. "After I gave you explicit instructions to stay away from her." "I was just trying to warn her," Marcus repeated. "She has a right to know the truth." "What she deserves," Damien interrupted, his voice lowering to a truly dangerous tone, "is to be left in peace by men who have already caused her more than enough pain." He then glanced at his guards. "Please escort Mr. Hayes back to his car. Ensure that he fully understands that if he ever approaches Emma again, our entire business arrangement is terminated." Marcus's composure crumbled. "Please, don't do this. The engagement has been called off. I have already lost half of my clients. Amber's family refuses to have anything to do with me anymore." "There are consequences," Damien stated simply, "for the choices you make. You should consider yourself lucky they are not far worse." The guard stepped forward and Marcus scrambled backward, all of his previous confidence having completely evaporated. "You are making a terrible mistake, Emma," he shouted as they guided him away. "He will ruin you just like he ruins everyone he touches." And then he was gone, forced into his car which sped away from the curb as if the devil himself were in pursuit. I remained frozen on the hospital steps, my heart pounding in my chest, trying to make sense of what I had just witnessed. Damien's hand remained on my back, a steady grounding pressure that somehow kept me from falling apart. "How long were you standing there?" I asked. "Long enough to see what mattered." He gently turned me to face him, his intense gaze searching my expression. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," I said. It was the only honest answer I had. Is any of what he said true? About that fire, and the shipments, and the people who have gone missing? Damien's jaw clenched. Yes. That single word struck me with the force of a physical blow. Some small part of me had desperately hoped he would deny everything, that he would laugh it off and tell me Marcus was simply a desperate liar. But he did not. He offered me the truth, sharp and unsparing. "I am not a good man, Emma." His hands rose to cup my face. "I have done things that would make you sick. I have hurt people, and I have destroyed lives. I function in a world where violence is a tool, and loyalty is something purchased with fear. Then why are you telling me this?" "Because you are different," he said, his thumbs gently stroking my cheekbones. "Because when I am with you, I remember how it feels to want to be a better person. Not good. I can never be good, but I can be better than I am." Tears started to burn in my eyes. "I received a phone call 3 days ago," I confessed. "Someone was warning me to stay away from you." His face immediately grew dark. "And why did you not tell me about this?" "Because I was worried you would do something horrible to whoever it was. Because I was trying to figure out if they were telling the truth." I placed my hands over his. "Because I am absolutely terrified, Damien. I am scared of you, and I am scared of your world, and I am scared of how much I am starting to care about you in spite of all of it. You have every right to be terrified." He pulled me even closer, until almost no space remained between us. "Every single thing that Marcus said is true. I am a dangerous man. Just being with me will put you in harm's way. The intelligent thing to do would be to turn around right now and never look in this direction again." "I know," I whispered. "But you are not going to do that, are you?" A glimmer of something that looked like hope appeared in his eyes. "No." The word left my lips feeling steady and sure. "Because I have spent my entire life being safe. And what has it gotten me? A man who cast me aside the second I became an inconvenience to him. A job that pays me just enough to get by. An entire existence that felt more like slowly drowning than actually living." I took a final step forward, completely closing the tiny gap between us. "Maybe a little danger is exactly what I need. Maybe you are what I need." At that, his restraint finally broke. His mouth came down on mine in a kiss that was not gentle or careful in any way. It was a raw combination of possession, of unspoken promises, and of sheer desperation all tangled together. And I kissed him back with every ounce of strength I had, channeling 6 months of agony and isolation and constant fear into the powerful connection between us. When we finally pulled away from each other, both of us breathing heavily, he rested his forehead against mine. "If you choose to stay with me, I cannot promise that you will be safe. I cannot promise that life will be easy. The only thing I can promise is that I will defend you with every resource I have, and that anyone who ever tries to harm you will have to answer to me directly. I promise that you will never, ever feel invisible again. That is enough for me." And it was. Heaven help me. It truly was. That is more than enough. "Come home with me," he said. It was not a question, but it was not quite an order either. It was an invitation, a sincere offering. "Stay with me." I should have said no. I should have requested time to think, some space, some shred of logic in this completely insane new reality. Instead, I just nodded. The penthouse had a different energy this time. Or perhaps I was the one who felt different, no longer like a guest, but like someone who might actually belong there. Damien's security team vanished as we walked in, leaving the two of us completely alone in the vast space that gazed out over the sprawling city. "There is something you must understand," Damien said, guiding me over to the massive windows where we had stood what felt like a lifetime ago. My rivals will view you as a vulnerability. They will attempt to use you as a way to get to me. There will be danger, very real danger, and I cannot always shield you from every part of it. I understand that. Do you really? He asked, turning me to face him. Because once you become mine, truly mine, there is no turning back from it. I do not share, Emma. I do not ever let go. If you give yourself to me, I will keep you, and I will not be gentle about holding on. Those words were supposed to frighten me. Instead, they lit a fire deep in my chest that felt perilously close to pure desire. Show me, I whispered. His eyes flashed with a dark intensity. Emma, show me what it truly means to be yours. I reached up, my fingers finding the small buttons of his shirt. I am so tired of being careful, and I am tired of always being afraid. Show me what happens when I finally stop running from this. For a long moment, he just stared down at me as if he could not quite believe the words he was hearing. Then his iron control completely shattered. He kissed me like he was trying to consume me whole. His hands were everywhere at once, pulling me in at my waist, tracing the line of my back, tangling themselves in my hair. I responded with an equal, desperate fervor, tugging at his shirt until the buttons finally scattered across the hardwood floor, running my hands over skin that felt hot and solid and so very real. Are you sure? He breathed against my lips, his voice ragged. I am sure. I had never been more sure of anything in my entire life. In one fluid motion, he swept me up into his arms, carrying me down the long hall to his bedroom. It was not the guest room this time, but his own space, his personal territory. The bed was absolutely enormous, the sheets made of a dark silk that felt cool against my overheated skin as he gently laid me down upon them. I need to hear you say it, he demanded, his body covering mine like a warm blanket. His presence was a perfect, crushing weight above me, a finality I craved. Tell me you are mine. The words were not a request, they were a demand. I am yours. Saying it felt like casting off chains I never knew I was wearing. I am all yours, Damien. What followed was not an act of tenderness. It was a feverish claiming, an undeniable possession. We were two souls who had orbited each other for too long, finally collapsing into the center of our gravity. He memorized my body with his hands and his mouth. He learned the meaning of every sound that escaped my lips, driving me higher until I finally came apart in his arms. And when he filled me, when our bodies moved in a flawless, ancient rhythm, it was like discovering a home in a country I never knew existed. Later, we were a tangle of limbs, with the distant city lights casting a mosaic across our skin. His fingers drew slow, aimless circles on my shoulder, and I felt a profound quiet settle in my soul for the first time in months. I meant every word I said, he whispered against my hair. You belong to me now. I will end anyone who even tries to touch you. That declaration should have terrified me far more than it did. I could feel the low rumble of his laughter deep in his chest. Most likely. He gathered me even closer against him. I want you to move in with me. I lifted my head from his chest, my eyes wide. What did you say? Your apartment is not a safe place. Here, under my roof, I can give you real protection. Here, you will have everything you could ever require. His hand gently cupped my cheek. Here, you will always be with me. Just agree. His thumb traced the outline of my lips, a feather-light touch. Let me provide for you in the way you have always deserved. Allow me to give you the kind of life Marcus was incapable of offering. I do not want the life Marcus planned. No, he said. You deserve so much more than that. He gave me a smile that was completely real and full of warmth. So let me be the one to give it to you. Everything was happening too quickly. The scale of it all was overwhelming. It was too much. But when I stared into his eyes, I saw an absolute conviction there. I saw a fierce, unyielding shield, and a possessive fire that burned only for me. Without thinking, I found myself nodding. Yes, that single word changed the entire world. In just 1 week, the few belongings I cherished were moved into his stunning penthouse. After 2 weeks, I had given the final notice on my old apartment, and within a single month, I had dramatically reduced my hours at the hospital, letting that part of my life fade away to a schedule that felt almost human, because Damien refused to let me work myself into an early grave. Marcus simply vanished from my world entirely. I heard whispers that he had fled the city, seeking a place so remote that Damien Cross's influence could not touch him. Apparently, Amber had already cut him loose before he ran, taking all her family's wealth and influence with her. A part of me thought I should feel some guilt over his ruin. I felt nothing. Sarah came to visit me one time, her eyes growing wide as she absorbed the scale of the penthouse apartment. She stared at the breathtaking view, at the undeniable proof of a fortune I could barely comprehend. "So, you are actually going through with this," she said, "building a life with that dangerous man." "He is not in the mob," I corrected. That was a fine point to argue. Damien's corporate empire thrived in legally ambiguous spaces, but it was not traditional organized crime. And I am not just playing, Emma. She took my hand, her gaze turning serious. "I am happy that you are happy. Truly. But you must be careful, please. Men like him are never safe." "I know," I told her, squeezing her hand back. "But being safe almost destroyed me. Perhaps a little danger is precisely what my life has been missing." 6 months after that night in the hospital, the night I wiped blood from the temple of a complete stranger, I was standing in Damien's penthouse. Our penthouse. A ring had materialized on my finger 2 weeks earlier. He explained it was not a ring for an engagement, but a ring of promise. It was a symbol declaring that I belonged to him, just as he belonged to me. The future unfolded before us, filled with uncertainty, and very likely, with peril. His enemies were not imaginary, and the threats against him were very real. But as Damien folded his arms around me from behind, his chin coming to rest on my shoulder while we gazed at the city far below, I felt more secure than I ever had when I was trying to be invisible to the world. "Do you have any regrets?" he asked, his voice low. I thought of Marcus. I thought of the life I had surrendered, and of the woman I had been just 6 months ago. She was exhausted, unseen, and drowning in silence. Then, I thought about the woman I was in that moment. I was seen. I was claimed. I was alive. No regrets. I turned within his arms, reaching up on my toes to meet his lips, not a single one. His arms pulled me closer, a perfect embrace that was both possessive and protective. "Good. Because you are with me now, Emma Chen. You are mine, forever." That word, forever, felt dangerous. It felt impossible. And yet, it felt exactly like the one thing I had been desperately searching for, without even knowing its name. "Forever," I whispered back, and I kissed him again to seal the promise. Outside our window, the entire city sparkled with endless possibilities. But inside, held securely in the arms of a perilous man who had somehow become my salvation, I finally understood the meaning of being truly alive. It was not about living safely or cautiously. It was about living completely, intensely, and with a heart that embraced the danger. And I would never choose to have it any other way. If this story stayed with you, hit that like button so it can find someone else who needs to hear it. Share it with someone who has ever felt invisible, who has ever been made to feel small by someone who was supposed to love them. Drop a comment and tell me, what was the moment that hit you the hardest? Was it when Marcus tried to humiliate her? Was it when Damien said she would never feel invisible again? Or was it something else entirely? And if you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. I pour my heart into every single story, and I do not want you to miss the next one. If you are ready for another emotional journey, the next video is waiting right on your screen. This content was carefully researched, crafted, and manually edited by our team to bring you meaningful lessons and inspiration.